The Galactic Council, an assembly of the universe's most powerful beings, held dominion over countless star systems, exerting its influence with an iron grip. They wielded technology so advanced that it seemed like magic to younger civilizations, and they rarely encountered opposition. Humanity, in their eyes, was insignificant, a young, confined species incapable of any true threat. But as history has often shown, underestimating humanity was a dangerous mistake. Within the Council's grand capital, representatives from the most dominant races in the galaxy gathered to discuss new intelligence reports. The Council's chamber was a marvel of architecture, a massive structure made of shimmering metals and crystal-like materials that seemed to pulse with energy. Delegates from every corner of the galaxy sat in ornate seats, casting eerie shadows under the strange ambient lights. A tall, silver-skinned counselor with eyes that gleamed like starlight addressed the assembly. Her presence was as mesmerizing as a celestial event. Her skin shimmered softly, catching the light and refracting it in subtle, ethereal hues. "We've received unsettling reports," she said, her voice echoing in the vast chamber. "The humans, they're preparing something." Across the chamber, a counselor with liquid metal skin leaned forward, his movements fluid and elegant. He spoke with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, his voice smooth as velvet. "Let them play with their primitive toys," he sneered, dismissing the warning with a flick of his hand. "Their species is young and undisciplined. A single fleet could suppress them." Yet not all members were so quick to disregard the human threat. From the shadows, a group of enigmatic observers watched silently, their eyes gleaming with colors unknown to any human spectrum. They were cloaked in flowing garments that seemed woven from the fabric of space itself, moving with a grace that felt almost hypnotic, as if each step were a carefully crafted dance. Among them were beings with shimmering gem-like skin and hair that cascaded down like rivers of light, their gaze carrying a mysterious allure that made them impossible to ignore. For a moment, the assembly fell silent, entranced by the presence of these otherworldly beings whose every motion held a quiet, magnetic charm. Their very essence was a reminder of the beauty that could exist in the vastness of the cosmos, both serene and deadly. They exchanged glances, an unspoken understanding passing between them, as if they knew that humanity's potential could be far more than the Council was prepared to handle. Far from the watchful eyes of the Galactic Council, humanity had indeed been preparing. Hidden deep within the mountains and oceanic depths of Earth, and in remote colonies far from prying sensors, the human military had been constructing a secret fleet for years. These ships weren't just machines of war, they were masterpieces of engineering, designed with a blend of Terran resilience and beauty, crafted to instill both awe and fear in those who would one day witness their power. Captain Alaric Hayes stood on the bridge of the flagship, HSS Vanguard, overlooking the fleet as it prepared for launch. The Vanguard was an elegant beast, a sleek, angular dreadnought forged from alloys that absorbed light, making the vessel seem like a living shadow. The ship pulsed with hidden power, its hull laced with lines of iridescent energy that flowed and shifted like rivers of molten metal. Hayes ran a hand along the cool surface of his command console, feeling a connection with the ship that bordered on the spiritual. As the final countdown echoed through the command deck, he looked at his crew, each one handpicked for their skills, dedication, and the spark of something unnameable, a shared sense of destiny. His gaze fell upon his tactical officer, a woman named Alara, whose calm demeanor masked an intensity that was almost magnetic. Her movements were precise, graceful as she worked the console, her fingers dancing over controls with a delicate but commanding touch. Her eyes, a piercing shade of green, met his for a brief moment, a silent communication passing between them, a bond forged in trust and respect. Around him, other officers and crew members worked in synchrony, their uniforms tailored to fit like a second skin, enhancing their streamlined movements. They were the best humanity had to offer, their appearance striking, their resolve unwavering. The air on the bridge was thick with purpose, each person radiating a quiet, focused energy, as though they were part of something larger than themselves. There was a sense of elegance here, a beauty that went beyond mere appearance, a harmony between man and machine, all dedicated to a single goal. As the Vanguard began its launch sequence, the view screen shifted to reveal the fleet outside, a sight to behold. Row upon row of warships stood ready, their dark hulls gleaming under the distant starlight. Each ship held a unique design, as if reflecting the diversity and creativity of the species that built them. They seemed to hover in the void with a quiet menace, their sleek forms whispering promises of both grace and destruction. This fleet was humanity's answer to the Council's arrogance, a silent, beautiful threat waiting to be unleashed. The fleet moved silently through the dark, veiled by advanced cloaking technology that rendered them nearly invisible. The Galactic Council's patrols had no idea they were about to witness the emergence of a power they'd dismissed as inferior. To them, humanity was merely a minor species confined to its corner of the galaxy, a mere nuisance with no real influence. But today that misconception would be shattered. As the Vanguard and its fleet approached the outer rim of the Council's core territory, Captain Hayes ordered a halt. It was here that they would make their presence known. Hayes nodded to Ilara, who tapped a sequence into her console, activating a signal that would resonate across Council communications. It was a warning, a declaration, a simple message stating that humanity was here to reclaim its freedom, and any opposition would be met with force. Meanwhile, across the galaxy on the capital world of the Council, officials watched as their screens lit up with strange, unfamiliar signals. In the Council's grand chamber, representatives from dozens of species murmured in confusion and disbelief. At the center, the head of the Council, a regal figure draped in flowing robes that shimmered like liquid silver, narrowed her eyes, trying to decipher the message flashing across their displays. It was then that the Council's sensors picked up the approaching fleet. One by one, the cloaked ships of humanity dropped their veils, revealing themselves in all their dark, majestic glory. The Vanguard was at the forefront, an ominous shadow that seemed to absorb light, its sleek, angular lines contrasting sharply against the cold, starry backdrop. The ship was beautiful in its design, both elegant and terrifying, a testament to the dual nature of its mission, peace if allowed, but destruction if provoked. The Council representatives stared in stunned silence as they took in the sight of humanity's hidden power. This wasn't just an armada, it was a message, carefully crafted and meticulously delivered. Each ship seemed to hold a distinct personality, its design a reflection of its crew's spirit and culture, and together they formed an image that was both cohesive and mesmerizing. They were warriors, yes, but there was a beauty in their defiance, a sensuality in the way they defied the Council's arrogance with every sleek curve and glowing line of their vessels. The head of the Council turned to her advisors, her voice tight with barely concealed alarm. Who allowed these humans to build such monstrosities? Back on the Vanguard, Hayes watched as the Council's fleet began to mobilize. His heart pounded, not with fear, but with the thrill of the unknown. He took a deep breath, his mind calm and focused. He knew what was coming, and he knew his crew was ready. With a final glance at Ilara and his officers, he gave the order. Prepare for engagement. Show them what humanity is capable of. The fleet surged forward, each ship advancing with the silent power of a storm rolling in. As the Council's vessels scrambled to intercept, Captain Hayes observed them with a quiet intensity. These ships were imposing, adorned with symbols and weaponry meant to intimidate. But to him, they lacked the elegance and strength that humanity's fleet exuded. This was a dance of technology and resolve, one that humanity had spent decades perfecting in secret. As the two forces closed the distance, Hayes noticed a particular group of Council ships ahead, each one manned by the Council's elite guards, known for their ruthlessness and their almost statuesque presence. These soldiers weren't just warriors, they were legends across the galaxy, beings whose appearance inspired awe and respect. Draped in shimmering armor that caught the starlight, they seemed to float across their decks with an unearthly grace, their forms almost luminous against the dark void. But today, even their beauty couldn't distract from the steely resolve radiating from the human fleet. The Council's command ship, a vessel of unparalleled splendor, approached the Vanguard's position, its hull glinting with exotic metals and intricate carvings that seemed to tell stories of ancient battles and conquests. Hayes allowed himself a moment to appreciate the craftsmanship. It was breathtaking, a relic from an era of galactic history that humanity had only heard about in whispers. The ship's captain appeared on the screen, an alien woman with a regal bearing, her features sharp and otherworldly, her skin like polished obsidian, and her eyes a piercing silver that seemed to see right into the heart of her opponent. She spoke with a voice that was rich and melodic, a sound that could easily captivate anyone who heard it. You, humans, dare to challenge the Council's authority? Have you any idea who you're dealing with? Hayes smiled, unshaken by her words or her hypnotic beauty. We know exactly who we're dealing with, but I don't think you realize who we are. Today, the galaxy learns that humanity will not be caged. The alien captain's gaze narrowed, her silver eyes flashing with a dangerous light. But there was something more there, a flicker of intrigue, even admiration. It was as though she hadn't encountered anyone who could stand up to her with such confidence, who could stare into her fierce gaze without flinching. For a moment, it seemed as if time stood still between them, a connection bridging the vast distance as they both recognized the unyielding spirit in each other. Without warning, the first shots were fired, shattering the quiet tension. Plasma bolts streaked across the void, lighting up the darkness in bursts of green and blue. The Vanguard retaliated with precision, its beams cutting through the Council's defenses, marking the start of a fierce and deadly engagement. Hayes watched with a cool intensity, orchestrating his fleet's maneuvers with the ease of a conductor guiding a symphony, each ship moving in perfect harmony to outmaneuver the Council's forces. In the heart of the Council's command ship, the alien captain's face hardened as she watched her own vessels struggle against humanity's relentless assault. For the first time, she realized that these humans were not just defiant, they were capable. She whispered to herself, "Perhaps we underestimated them." The battle unfolded like a celestial ballet, humanity's ships weaving between Council vessels, each movement calculated, each strike precise. Plasma beams cut through the dark, illuminating the faces of the crew as they watched their enemies struggle against the might of the human fleet. Hayes orchestrated the assault with an unwavering calm, his gaze focused, his jaw set, as he guided his fleet to exploit every weakness in the Council's defenses. As the Vanguard pushed deeper into the enemy formation, Hayes noticed a strange glimmer on his tactical display. Another Council ship, breaking formation, moving to intercept. Unlike the others, this vessel was more compact, its design sleek and agile, clearly meant for speed and close combat. And standing at its helm was another alien captain, her presence radiating an ethereal beauty that even the chaos of battle couldn't obscure. Her skin shimmered with an iridescent hue, like pearls in starlight, and her hair, silver and flowing, moved as if stirred by an invisible breeze. She looked directly into the visual feed, locking eyes with Hayes. There was no need for words. The tension between them spoke volumes. Her gaze was steady, filled with both defiance and a strange, unspoken connection, as if she understood the weight of the decisions he was making, the lives he was willing to risk to secure humanity's future. Hayes inclined his head in acknowledgement, his expression a mix of respect and resolve. This was a warrior who understood the stakes, one who would defend her own kind just as fiercely as he would defend his. For a brief, silent moment, the two captains held each other's gaze, each recognizing the strength in the other, a strength that transcended species and alliances. But the silence was broken as her ship darted forward, firing a series of high-energy blasts aimed at the Vanguard. Hayes reacted instantly, ordering evasive maneuvers, and his ship rolled to the side, narrowly dodging the attack. Yet even as they clashed, there was a sense of poetry in their movements, a rhythm that seemed almost choreographed. They were locked in a deadly dance, each anticipating the other's moves, countering with precision. As they engaged, Hayes' admiration for her skill only grew. She moved with a grace that was almost hypnotic, every decision she made executed with the elegance of an artist. Her ship glided through the chaos, evading fire while striking with uncanny accuracy, her movements a testament to the fierce dedication she had to her people. Then suddenly a glint of understanding crossed her face as she recognized humanity's strategy, a realization that this was no ordinary skirmish, but a calculated strike aimed at the heart of the Council's power. She pressed a hand to her chest, as if feeling the weight of that understanding settle within her, before turning her gaze back to Hayes, her expression now tinged with something more than mere defiance. Perhaps respect? In that fleeting moment, Hayes knew he'd made an impression. He could see it in her eyes, the unspoken acknowledgement of humanity's resolve, of their right to carve a place among the stars. But there was no time to dwell on it. The battle raged on, and both captains resumed their fierce engagement, each one knowing that only one side would emerge victorious. As the human fleet drew nearer to the Galactic Council's core worlds, Anticipation gripped every soldier, every commander, every soul on Earth's side. Captain Orion felt the weight of this moment more than anyone. Standing on the bridge of the Indomitable, he looked out at the stars, knowing that soon, those pinpricks of light would be eclipsed by the Council's might. They were on the edge of uncharted territory, entering the heart of a galaxy ruled by beings who had once scoffed at the idea that humans were anything more than a primitive nuisance. But the journey was no mere sprint through the stars. Along the way, the fleet encountered remnants of the Council's smaller forces, ships that tried, and failed, to halt humanity's advance. Each encounter was like a dance in the void, Earth's sleek, dark ships moving with precision and devastating grace, weaving in and out of enemy formations, leaving trails of fire and twisted metal in their wake. The Council's ships, once thought invincible, crumbled under the might of technology Earth had kept hidden for so long. It was a display of power that defied everything the galaxy had ever known about humans. During one encounter, the crew found themselves momentarily awestruck by a ship carrying dignitaries from a planet known for its beauty. As the ships drew close, the screens lit up with an ethereal glow, revealing passengers with radiant, gem-like skin that shimmered under the distant starlight. Their eyes, vast pools of color unseen on Earth, flickered with a mysterious allure. Even Captain Orion, hardened by years of battle, couldn't help but feel the pull of their beauty, a reminder of the strange wonders that lay scattered across the stars. These beings, while no allies, looked upon the humans with something close to admiration, perhaps even respect. Orion's voice cut through the momentary trance, bringing his crew back to their mission. They could appreciate beauty, but they could not afford distractions. Humanity had a message to deliver, and nothing would stand in its way. The fleet pushed forward, leaving awestruck survivors behind, a silent testament to their unstoppable drive. As they neared the Council's innermost defenses, the size and formation of the enemy fleet became apparent. The Council had gathered its most formidable ships, an armada that spanned miles and bristled with weapons designed to vaporize any enemy daring to challenge their rule. The human fleet slowed, each captain preparing for the inevitable clash. Captain Orion took a deep breath, steadying himself for the battle that could reshape the fate of humanity. The final monumental confrontation was upon them, and he knew they were ready for whatever came next. As the Indomitable led humanity's fleet into position, the tension on the bridge was thick. The crew watched the massive Council armada, each ship a behemoth of alien engineering, hovering protectively around the Council's core world like a fortress of cold, unyielding metal. The Council had spared no resources. They had amassed every battleship, every dreadnought, every warship in their arsenal, forming an impenetrable wall of firepower. Captain Orion stood in silence, his gaze steady, his expression unreadable. Beside him, Commander Iris, his trusted second-in-command, murmured, "This is it, Captain. The culmination of everything we've prepared for." Orion nodded, his voice a quiet rumble. "Yes, Commander. Everything humanity has ever endured, every hardship, every sacrifice, has led us to this moment." He raised his hand, issuing commands to his crew. "Prepare the Nova cannons, arm all fighters. Today, we carve a new chapter into the stars." The fleet moved as one, Earth's ships forming a tight formation as they approached the Council's line. To the Council's fleet, humanity's ships were like sleek shadows, dark, formidable vessels that moved with precision, almost as if each ship were guided by a single mind. From the Council's vantage point, it must have looked like an omen, an eerie wave of silent power advancing in perfect formation. The Indomitable's weapon systems hummed to life, casting a faint glow over the bridge. Orion's eyes flickered to his crew, their faces tense but resolute. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to feel the weight of his responsibility. Each life in his fleet trusted him to guide them, to lead humanity through this storm and into a future where they would no longer be under the Council's oppressive thumb. A cold voice crackled over the communication line, breaking the silence. It was one of the Council's admirals, his tone dripping with disdain. "Human fleet, you approach the Galactic Council's core world unbidden. This is a final warning. Turn back or face annihilation." Orion's jaw tightened. He knew they couldn't back down. Not now, not after everything they had sacrificed to reach this point. He replied with steely resolve, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 years of struggle. "We are not here to submit to your tyranny. We are here to end it. Prepare yourselves." The alien fleet stirred, their weapons powering up, a flickering array of lights and deadly energy fields. The silence before the storm was deafening, a moment stretched thin with anticipation. Orion's gaze held steady as he gave the final order. "All ships engage!" The first wave of human ships surged forward, energy beams slicing through the cold darkness of space. The Council fleet met them head-on, and the void erupted in a blaze of explosions as ships twisted and shattered under the onslaught. As Captain Orion watched the battlefield unfold, he realized that this battle would not be won by brute force alone. There was something deeper at play, a reckoning that would test humanity's courage, strategy, and unity in the face of overwhelming power. And somewhere deep in the Council's formation, a new, hidden threat awaited, one that could change everything. The battlefield was a scene of breathtaking chaos. Humanity's fleet clashed with the Council's forces in an explosion of light and darkness, a violent symphony of energy beams and projectiles tearing through the void. Captain Orion, at the helm of the Indomitable, maintained a calm, calculating gaze as he watched the Council's ships begin to falter, their rigid formations crumbling under the relentless, coordinated onslaught. But as the skirmish intensified, Orion noticed a subtle shift within the Council's lines. A cluster of ships had started to pull back, their movements almost too organized, too deliberate. It was as if they were repositioning, preparing for something hidden. The tactical displays on the Indomitable flickered with new data as sensors detected an unusual energy surge deep within the Council's formation. Commander Iris, his second-in-command, leaned closer, her voice low and urgent. "Sir, we're picking up a massive energy signature. Whatever they're hiding, it's no ordinary weapon." Orion's jaw tightened. The Council was known for its advanced technology, much of which humanity had yet to fully understand. If they had a hidden weapon, this might be the key to their control over the galaxy. The reason even the most powerful races submitted without question. He knew they couldn't risk underestimating it. "Hold formation," Orion ordered, his voice steady but edged with caution. "I want every ship on high alert. If they're bringing out their secret weapon, we need to be ready to adapt." Across the Indomitable's bridge, his crew worked with focused intensity, eyes trained on their consoles, fingers moving with precision as they prepared for whatever lay ahead. The hum of the ship's systems grew louder, a steady pulse that seemed to echo the crew's anticipation. The tension was thick, an unspoken understanding passing among them. This wasn't just another battle. This was humanity's stand against centuries of oppression. As Orion continued to observe the Council's formation, a flicker of movement caught his eye on the main display. A single ship, a massive vessel unlike anything they'd seen before, was emerging from the shadows. It gleamed with a cold metallic sheen, its hull covered in intricate designs that pulsed with a dark energy, as if the ship itself were alive, breathing with malevolent intent. A murmur rippled through the bridge crew as they took in the sight of the Council's warship. The sheer size of it dwarfed even the largest human dreadnoughts, and its weapon systems glowed ominously, casting a blood-red light across the Council's remaining fleet. Commander Iris's voice was barely a whisper, but her words carried a weight that silenced the room. "Is that a planetary destroyer?" Orion's gaze hardened. Humanity's fleet had faced overwhelming odds before, but this was different. This was a weapon designed not for defense but for obliteration, a tool of terror meant to crush any who dared defy the Council. He took a steadying breath, his mind racing through possible strategies. "We need to neutralize that thing before it can fire," he said, his voice a quiet resolve. "If that weapon reaches full power, this battle could end in an instant." A ripple of agreement passed through the crew, their determination evident in every movement. The Indomitable and the entire human fleet had been crafted with resilience in mind, but facing a planetary destroyer was a challenge they had only theorized in simulations. Orion gave a slight nod to Iris. "Coordinate with the fleet. Prepare our heaviest artillery. We'll show them that humanity isn't so easily wiped from the stars." The Indomitable began to shift position, moving to the front of the fleet as Orion's orders echoed across the command channels. The other captains responded in unison, their ships closing ranks, each one prepared to lay everything on the line to ensure that humanity's defiance would be remembered. The silence on the bridge was palpable, broken only by the steady hum of the ship's systems. Orion felt the weight of every eye on him, but he stood firm, a symbol of humanity's unyielding spirit. With a final glance at the ominous warship looming on the display, he raised his hand, signaling the beginning of their assault. Fire! A surge of power erupted from the Indomitable and her surrounding fleet as the first volley of high-energy projectiles tore through the darkness, hurtling toward the Council's monstrous warship. The void lit up in shades of blue and red, flashes of energy colliding against the immense vessel's shimmering shield, casting an eerie glow across the battlefield. Yet the destroyer remained unshaken, its defenses absorbing the assault like a fortress of steel and plasma. Orion narrowed his gaze, analyzing the impact through the tactical readout on his console. The Council's planetary destroyer was absorbing their initial attack, its shield barely flickering under the concentrated fire. It was clear that their standard weapons wouldn't be enough to penetrate this advanced barrier, but he wasn't ready to give up. Commander Iris glanced at him, her expression determined. "Captain, our Nova cannons are primed. If we focus fire, we might stand a chance of breaching their shield." Orion nodded, understanding the risks involved. The Nova cannons were humanity's most potent weapon, capable of unleashing devastating energy, but they required precise coordination to achieve maximum impact. If they failed, they would only drain their resources, leaving the fleet vulnerable. Yet in this moment, there was no room for hesitation. "Prepare for synchronized firing," Orion commanded, his voice resonating with confidence. "Relay the timing to all ships. I want every cannon firing in unison." Across the fleet, captains relayed orders to their crews, their faces tense as they prepared for what could be a make-or-break moment. The bridge of each ship buzzed with focused energy, officers and engineers working with silent precision as they calibrated their targeting systems. The entire fleet moved as one, each ship positioning itself to deliver its most powerful strike. The seconds ticked by, each one an eternity as the final preparations were made. The planetary destroyer loomed ahead, its presence a menacing reminder of the Council's oppressive strength. But in those quiet moments before the strike, Orion could feel the resolve of his crew and his fleet. They were more than warriors. They were symbols of humanity's unbreakable will. "On my mark." Orion's voice cut through the silence. 3, 2, 1, fire! The fleet's Nova cannons fired in perfect harmony, beams of concentrated energy lancing through the darkness. They struck the destroyer's shield in unison, creating a brilliant flash that illuminated the battlefield, momentarily blinding those watching from afar. The shield wavered, shimmering violently as it struggled to absorb the sheer force of the assault. And then, with a deafening crackle, the shield shattered, fragments of energy dissipating like shards of glass across the void. Cheers erupted across the bridge as the Council's warship was left exposed, its sleek hull vulnerable for the first time. Orion didn't allow the moment to linger. "Target their weapon systems and engines. We need to cripple them before they can retaliate." The human fleet unleashed a second wave, pinpointing weak points along the destroyer's hull. Explosions erupted along its massive frame, bursts of fire and metal scattering into the void. The destroyer began to list, its movement sluggish as the concentrated fire took its toll, but it wasn't defeated yet. In a desperate move, the Council's destroyer retaliated, firing a barrage of plasma bolts toward the Indomitable. Orion's ship shuddered as the first wave struck, the impact sending a violent tremor through the bridge. Lights flickered and the crew gripped their stations, bracing against the onslaught. "Shields holding at 70%, Iris reported, her voice steady despite the strain. "But they can't take much more of this." Orion clenched his jaw, eyes fixed on the display as he calculated their next move. They had gained the upper hand, but the destroyer's remaining weapons were formidable. If they couldn't take it down completely, they risked a counterattack that could decimate the fleet. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the final push. "Divert all remaining power to the forward cannons. We end this now." The Indomitable surged forward, leading the charge as the human fleet closed in on the wounded behemoth. Plasma and energy beams streaked through the void, their fierce glow casting shadows across the faces of those watching on the bridge. With each hit, the destroyer's defenses weakened, its hull cracking under the relentless assault. Finally, with a blinding flash, the destroyer's core overloaded, sending shockwaves rippling through space as the massive vessel disintegrated. The Council's weapon of terror was no more. A heavy silence settled over the bridge as the crew absorbed the reality of their victory. They had struck a blow not only against the Council's military strength, but against the very symbol of its power. Orion allowed himself a moment of relief, but he knew this was far from over. This victory would only embolden the Council to retaliate, and the path ahead would be treacherous. But for now, humanity had made its mark. Second half, as the remnants of the Council's destroyer drifted in the void, the human fleet regrouped, their ships forming a protective formation around the Indomitable. The crew was riding the high of victory, but Orion's eyes remained fixed on the tactical display, his mind racing with the implications of what they'd just achieved. They had taken down one of the Council's most fearsome weapons, a feat no species had dared to attempt, let alone survive. Commander Iris stepped beside him, her voice low. "Captain, we're detecting increased activity across the Council's core worlds. It looks like they're mobilizing their reserves." Orion nodded, his expression unreadable. He'd expected this reaction. The Council would never allow such an act of defiance to go unanswered. They had built their empire on fear and absolute control, and humanity's victory had shattered that illusion. Now they would stop at nothing to reassert their dominance. "Do we have an estimate on their numbers?" he asked, his tone steady. Iris studied her console, a hint of tension in her gaze. "Preliminary scans indicate at least 3 full fleets, sir, and there's something else." Orion's brow furrowed. "Go on." She hesitated, as if struggling to believe her own findings. "We're picking up another massive energy signature, similar to the one we detected before, but larger." A chill ran down Orion's spine. The Council had more than one planetary destroyer. It was a sobering reminder that their victory was only a small part of the battle. They had struck a blow, but now the Council would bring everything it had to crush them. He turned to his crew, his voice a quiet resolve. "Prepare for rapid maneuvers. We need to stay one step ahead. We're not dealing with a single weapon now. We're facing an entire armada armed to the teeth." The fleet sprang into action, each ship's engines roaring to life as they shifted into defensive positions. Orion watched the display, the silhouettes of the approaching Council fleets filling the screen. They were closing in fast, their ships arranged in an intimidating formation that spoke of centuries of military discipline. But Orion wasn't deterred. Humanity's fleet had proven itself, and his crew was prepared to give everything. He knew they were facing impossible odds, but there was a fire within him, a stubborn determination that refused to let go. "Send a message to the fleet," he said, his voice calm and unwavering. "Today we stand as one. We've defied them before, and we'll do it again. Every ship, every soldier, together, we're unstoppable." The message was broadcast to every corner of the fleet, and across the comm channels, captains and crew responded with fierce determination. They were ready to face the Council's full might, their resolve unbreakable in the face of impending battle. But as the Council's ships drew closer, Orion noticed something unusual on the display. One of the smaller Council ships had broken formation and was approaching alone, its movements cautious, almost hesitant. A signal flashed on the Indomitable's console, an incoming transmission. Orion raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Open a channel." The image of a Council envoy appeared on the screen, an alien with strikingly luminous skin and deep, calculating eyes. She wore a solemn expression, her voice echoing with an almost musical resonance. "Human fleet," she began, her tone formal but laced with tension, "you have proven surprising resilience. But this conflict need not continue. I bring an offer from the Council." A murmur rippled through the bridge as Orion regarded her carefully. It was unusual for the Council to offer terms, especially after a direct challenge. This was an unexpected twist, one that could be an opportunity or a trap. "What are your terms?" Orion asked, his voice guarded. The envoy's gaze flickered, a faint glimmer of something unreadable in her expression. "The Council acknowledges your capabilities. We are prepared to grant humanity autonomy within your current territory if you withdraw your forces immediately and cease all hostilities." A quiet gasp echoed among the crew, but Orion remained calm. Autonomy within their current territory was a tempting offer, one that would mean peace without further bloodshed. Yet he sensed there was more to it, a hidden price that the Council wasn't willing to reveal. He met the envoy's gaze unflinching. "And what guarantee do we have that the Council will honor this agreement?" The envoy hesitated, her eyes shifting ever so slightly. "The Council's word is its bond." Orion allowed a moment of silence to linger, the tension on the bridge palpable. His mind raced through the possibilities, weighing the risks and rewards. Accepting the offer could spare countless lives, but it also meant trusting a regime that had ruled with cruelty and intimidation for centuries. With a calm, steady breath, he spoke. "Your offer is noted, but humanity has earned its place among the stars. We won't be confined to the borders you dictate." A flicker of frustration crossed the envoy's face, but she masked it quickly. "Then you leave us no choice," she said, her voice tight with barely concealed anger. "Prepare to face the Council's full wrath." The transmission cut out, and the Council's ship veered back into formation, disappearing among the advancing fleet. Orion's decision had been made, and now there was no turning back. Humanity would fight for its right to exist as equals, without boundaries imposed by an oppressive regime. "Commander Iris," he said, his voice filled with resolve, "prepare all systems for engagement. We're about to show the Council what it means to be free." As the Council's armada closed in, the human fleet held its ground, ready to face the oncoming storm. This was their moment, a stand that would echo across the galaxy, a testament to their strength, their courage, and their unbreakable will. The Council's armada surged forward, filling the darkness with a relentless wave of firepower. Their ships moved with a precision that spoke of ages of dominance, each one positioning to create a near impenetrable wall. Humanity's fleet, though smaller in number, held its formation, a single, unyielding line facing the overwhelming force ahead. Captain Orion's voice rang across the bridge, calm but with a fierce undercurrent. "Stay sharp, everyone. This is the final stretch. Remember, we fight for freedom, not for conquest. Let that drive you." Commander Iris, standing beside him, tightened her grip on the railing as the first wave of the Council's fire struck. Explosions flared around the human fleet, their shields absorbing the impact. Orion watched the tactical display, noting the enemy's patterns, searching for weaknesses. "Rotate shields and reinforce the outer layer," he ordered, his gaze never wavering. "Keep our vulnerable systems protected." The fleet moved as one, adjusting its defenses with precision. But the Council's ships were relentless, pressing in from all sides, their weapons lighting up the void in blinding flashes. Each hit rattled the Indomitable and her companions, but humanity's ships held strong, pushing back with everything they had. As the battle raged, Orion's mind remained focused, analyzing the enemy's formations. He noticed a subtle pattern, a delay in the Council's rotations, a slight lag when they shifted positions. It was an opening, small but exploitable. "Commander Iris, relay coordinates to the fleet," he said, a spark of strategy lighting up his eyes. "Target their command center, we take out their leaders, we disrupt their chain of command." Iris nodded, transmitting the orders. Across the fleet, captains adjusted their positions, aligning their weapons for a focused strike. The human ships moved with deadly grace, weaving through the chaos, their sights locked on the Council's central vessels. "On my mark," Orion murmured, his voice a steady command. 3, 2, 1, fire! A barrage of energy beams tore through the darkness, converging on the Council's command ships. Explosions erupted as the enemy's defenses crumbled, their shields faltering under the concentrated assault. Orion watched with grim satisfaction as several of the Council's ships were disabled, their systems flickering before going dark. For the first time, the Council's formation wavered, their disciplined ranks breaking as panic rippled through their fleet. Orion seized the opportunity, his voice ringing with determination. "Press forward! Show them we are not just survivors, we are victors!" The human fleet advanced, their ships cutting through the enemy lines with a renewed sense of purpose. The Council's remaining ships scrambled to regroup, but the disruption had thrown their forces into disarray. For every Council ship that moved to counter, 2 more were struck down, their sleek hulls shattering under the relentless fire. But as victory seemed within reach, a new signal flashed on the Indomitable's display, a colossal energy signature, far greater than anything they had encountered before. Orion's gaze snapped to the screen, his eyes narrowing as a massive vessel appeared at the edge of the battlefield. It was the Council's final weapon, a dreadnought of unimaginable scale, bristling with weaponry that glowed with a dark, pulsating energy. Its very presence seemed to drain the light from the stars, casting a shadow over the entire field. This was their last stand, a behemoth designed to obliterate any opposition in one devastating blow. Commander Iris's voice was a whisper laced with awe and fear. "Captain, that ship, it's unlike anything we've faced." Orion took a steadying breath, his mind racing. They had come too far to turn back now. This was the Council's last attempt to crush them, to reassert their dominance through brute force. But he knew that humanity's strength lay not in numbers, but in resilience and unity. He turned to his crew, his voice filled with quiet resolve. "We've faced the Council's wrath, and we've endured. This ship may be powerful, but it is not invincible. Together, we'll bring it down." The fleet shifted formation, positioning themselves around the dreadnought as it unleashed its first strike. A massive energy beam tore through the void, narrowly missing the Indomitable as Orion ordered evasive maneuvers. The crew held their breath as they watched the beam's destructive path, its power enough to reduce entire fleets to ashes. Orion's mind worked quickly, calculating their next move. They couldn't match the dreadnought's firepower directly, but if they targeted its energy core, the source of its strength, they could end this battle with one decisive blow. "Commander Iris, prepare the Nova cannons," he commanded, his tone unwavering. "We're going to hit their core. Coordinate with the fleet. I want every ship focusing on that one weak point." The fleet moved with synchronized precision, aligning for the final assault. Energy pulsed through their weapons, Nova cannons humming with a lethal intensity as they charged for one last powerful strike. As the dreadnought powered up for another attack, Orion gave the order. "Fire!" The Nova cannons unleashed their full power, beams of concentrated energy converging on the dreadnought's core. For a moment, time seemed to stand still as the beams struck their target. The dreadnought's hull trembled, cracks spreading like veins of light as its core overloaded. With a deafening roar, the dreadnought exploded, fragments scattering across the void, the shockwave rippling through space. The Council's ultimate weapon was gone. A cheer erupted across the human fleet, their victory echoing through every comm channel. Humanity had not only survived, they had won. Orion allowed himself a moment of quiet pride as he looked out over the battlefield, now littered with the remnants of the Council's forces. They had defied the galaxy's most powerful regime and emerged victorious. But he knew this was only the beginning. Humanity had claimed its freedom, but the path ahead was uncharted, filled with new challenges and unknown allies and enemies alike. As the fleet prepared for the journey home, Orion looked to his crew, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Humanity was no longer confined to the shadows. They were now a force to be reckoned with, ready to carve their own destiny among the stars.